Well, thanks everyone for coming today. This is awesome. I was kind of joking that it's nice to be in a small room when it's packed. So appreciate you guys being here after the lunch session. But we're talking about decarbonizing industrial buildings today. We'll kind of get started on why industrial buildings. Why dedicate a whole panel to that. But before we get started, we'll just do a little. I'll introduce our awesome panelists who are experts in the decarbonizing and industrial space. So I'm Grant Waldron. I help support sustainability and strategy around portfolios at Gaia. I have Lindsay Pearson, who's a sustainability strategist at Lincoln. Richard Bogan, who's the director of capital projects at Rexford Industrial. Jason Carr, who's VP of industrial development at Affinius Capital, and Ryan McAvoy, principal and founder at Gaia. So this rounds out our panelists who will dive into the next things we'll see up here. So I won't read through all of this, but really the goal is we're looking at decarbonization. So we're going to talk about what that looks like from a portfolio strategy, and then both sides of the decarbonization coin, both that upfront embodied carbon, operational and ongoing carbon, and this really like forward thinking, like where is the industry headed? We have some awesome projects and just topics that we'll touch on. Like I said up front, like why are we talking about just industrial buildings today? I think in sustainability, we see these like flagship office buildings, retail centers, universities get a lot of hype when it comes to case studies. But industrial buildings really touch our lives, kind of every area. And one of the main reasons is just the growth of e-commerce. I think over the last 2 decades, we've just seen retail really shift, where a lot of goods and services are coming through industrial facilities, whether those are big distribution centers or your last mile facilities. We had a huge inflection point with the pandemic, where consumer just spending totally shift, and that's going to continue. So that just drives this need for this industrial space. But industrial is not just your warehouses. It's going to be cold storage facilities. It could be food manufacturing and processing facilities. It could be mom and pop shops, who are maybe plumbers and electricians. You have all sorts of things that fall underneath that umbrella. And then another one too that's getting a lot of obviously hype is data centers too. Those somewhat fall in that same bucket. It's a similar building. The use case inside is different, but that's a huge growth that has will continue over the next decade. We're obviously at Greenbuild, so we're talking about LEED certification. And I think it's also interesting to talk about industrial in the context of LEED certifications. So if you look at just version 4, which has been our prominent rating system for the last decade, it should come as a surprise that most projects are office buildings. But the second bucket is industrial. So it makes up a huge portion of our LEED certified buildings. When we look at floor area, it's the biggest one up there. 40% of certified floor area under version 4, 4.1 is industrial buildings. And I think some of that comes to people on this panel up here. You have leaders who have committed to using LEED as the framework for sustainability. One of the great programs out there is LEED Volume, which helps create portfolio strategies around sustainability and implementing that within LEED. So I think there's 50 plus industrial developers. You can think of an industrial developer, they're probably in the LEED Volume program, which is pretty cool. And before I turn it over to the panelists for their insights, really the way we're going to structure this conversation today is kind of the two sides of the coin when it comes to decarbonization. It's going to be that upfront embodied carbon, and then it'll be the ongoing operational carbon. And those are both super important. You've probably been on panels or you've heard sessions today. You'll hear more about that. I think it's really interesting in the context of industrial buildings because these buildings are concrete and steel boxes. When we think about upfront embodied carbon, concrete and steel are, very carbon intensive materials, and those are predominant materials that we build industrial with. On the flip side, some of these distribution centers have really low energy use intensities per square foot. So there's this really unique balance. Here's just an example, just to kind of make you start to think why it's important to balance those, is the upfront embodied carbon from building this industrial facility. It'll take 34 years of operating that facility to equal the amount of carbon that was emitted during that 12-month construction cycle. So we need to focus on both. You can't really look at one side without the other. So with that being said, I think we'll turn it over to the panelists, and we'll start with that kind of upfront embodied carbon. And I think we'll just go down the line, starting with Ryan. I guess what's inspiring you? When it comes to upfront carbon, what are you thinking about, and what gets you?
Yeah, exciting things. I think EPDs are great. We have 150,000 EPDs now or more, where 5-10 years ago we didn't have that many. So LEED putting that as a credit really jump-started that. And now California requires that for all buildings in California over 100,000 square feet to have an EPD and to do an LCA. So that's really great, and the tools that are available. And I think that, solar, heat pumps, and LED lights, you can get to net zero pretty easily. But how are we doing the embodied carbon? So that opportunity where solar was 15 years ago.
Yeah, so for us at Phineas Capital, one of the things that we're really excited about is what we've actually been able to execute upon. And so the hub at Ontario and Indian Ontario Airport it's 4 million square feet of industrial space, and we've Grant made the comment about it's steel, it's concrete, industrial space. There's no way to get around that. It just is what it is. And so we have the philosophy that we're not going to go completely away from concrete in the industrial space, but we need to learn how to expect more out of concrete. And we've been able to successfully do that there by reducing carbon with creative mixed designs, tips, wall panels. We significantly reduced the volume of concrete there, and we've realized about a 40% reduction in carbon output for the embodied carbon.
I'll kind of expand upon that, because there's a lot of design principles that maybe originated in the office space and then come across to the industrial space. But one that's unique to industrial space is the expanded joint slabs. And when you put in a new design, you're trying to go for one type of goal, and then in many engineering new principles, a few more opportunities come from it. So by just simply adding steel into the aggregate, into the mix, we were able to go and reduce the overall joint slab thickness, but also expand on the joints, and it's helped to reduce the overall concrete in there. But it's baby steps, and you take one step, and then eventually you're able to go into more. So it's an exciting step.
Something that's inspiring for us at Lincoln is the standardization and consistency that we're able to now implement and growing extensively with the LEED volume program for our industrial assets. And referencing back to what Grant already mentioned earlier, the focus when you think of the word sustainability is primarily on the showcase office buildings, mixed use developments, large land developments. And our approach has been, how can we implement a sustainability standard that does not necessarily, need to be the top best of the best. And we've been able to do that with the LEED volume program.
Awesome. Maybe we can dive into some of those a little bit. Jason, maybe starting with you on the hub. I feel like what you guys have done there is basically taken all these different strategies, lumped them together, and had a huge reduction. I mean, it's the lowest embodied carbon project out there that's conventional industrial building. What are some of the pros and cons and things that you guys ran into and figured out while going through that project?
Yeah, sure. So we partnered with McDonald Property Group out there, and one of the key takeaways from it is that we got involved very early, and the entire team, top to bottom, bought into our sustainability approach and reducing carbon and being innovative. We brought on board Gaia Concrete, who, let's be honest, a lot of our concrete providers are just kind of like, this is the way we've always done it, and we're going to keep doing it that way. And so they were not like that. They were fully on board with exploring new options. We went up to Utah and toured the TIPS wall panel facility, figured out a game plan as to how we were going to implement it. And then once we got an idea, we had their engineers work with our engineers, all during pre-development, and got everybody basically rowing in the same direction. The other kind of we'll say hurdle to get over was local jurisdictions understanding what TIPS panels were and the structural implications of that. And our engineering team, Miyamoto, was instrumental in that, as well as the TIPS engineers. They were all very just involved and locked arms going forward, and very communicative, and which is key and important in the early stages. If you get involved too late in the process, trying to change somebody's mind of something that they've done a certain way for so long is very, very difficult. So getting it approved on the front end was a huge part of our success.
Awesome. Richard, you talked about similar things with, bringing in different designs for your slabs. Maybe the same question, like what were some of the benefits that you found, maybe challenges that popped up, and where things go right now with Wexford?
I think expanding on what Tiff said here is that you had to bring in the partners really early on. We had to bring in the consultants, the GCs, and kind of help them understand what the goal that we were trying to achieve. And we'll touch on it a little bit later, is just education. You bring something new to the market. A lot of people are just so set in their ways of seeing a certain product and seeing something that they're familiar with. And that even on the construction side of it, they're very set on their ways and how they're about to go and put something in. So we brought consultants in and our strategic partners, and basically got going really early on what we were trying to achieve. And plenty of benefits that we saw from it. More benefits in the future that we know that we're going to be able to achieve once we're able to kind of teach the public on what we're actually being able to deliver. This product that we have, or that's out in the market, it has higher strength, it has the ability to be more elastic, and all these little positive fundamentals will allow us to bring something that's more beneficial to the building. So over time it'll be
Awesome. Then I guess, Lindsay, on your side with lead volume, how's that been implemented, and what are some of the benefits you guys have seen?
Yeah, I would say I'm all sustainability, so I sit in all the meetings for all asset classes across all of the regions that Lincoln operates in. And I chuckle to myself when I hear people say industrial doesn't do sustainability. It's their cold dark shells or triple net to a tenant. There's no sustainability there. But I actually think that Lincoln's industrial development is one of our most advanced sustainability programs, and specifically because our engagement with the lead volume program with Gaia. I think the importance of collaborating with a team, and a team that you align on values and virtues and how you operate, which has been why we've been so successful with Gaia. But then with the lead volume program, what we've been able to do is, have these pre-approved credits or items based off of the best practices that our teams already have in place. And I think, that's been a big part of the education piece is, we're not telling you you have to change something. This is what we already have in place, and it already meets these requirements. And again, we're not going after platinum. We're not going after gold. We may not even go after silver. Let's just get it certified, because with the cost savings that we get from the lead volume program, it's a much, much easier guess from our capital partners or for our investors because of the fee that we pay. And also then our own project team members, development managers who historically may be the ones that say, that's an easy value engineer, take it out. They have identified the efficiencies. They understand how easy it is because it is what we're doing as a best practice. And then we've also been able to now roll that into projects that don't pursue the lead volume program. And, I'm not one to say don't pursue the certification, but it's just, the market that we're in and the standards that we have, it doesn't pencil still for some projects. 2 square footage is too small, multiple buildings, whatever it may be. But now our teams think of this as our best practice and our standard, so they're still doing it. And I think that's been one of the best pros, but it's also been, hasn't been an easy journey to get there, but we're there now.
Yeah. Then Ryan, anything on the just availability of data around that as well?
Yes, I think with the EPDs, as we now have 150,000, we're able to do that. But HVAC and other equipment is slower coming, but now we are doing that on a variety of projects, which is great. We can have that. But I think we're just talking about slab thickness and fibers. You know, everybody wants a 7-inch slab. So leasing, acquisition, investment, 7-inch slab, 40-foot clear. So if you want to move over, you're saying, what is the strength I need? What kind of racking do I have? And what's the strength of that slab? And if you can decrease an inch off 1,000,000 square feet, that's a huge carbon savings and money savings. Really educating the market on, you know, the strength of the slab, not just the thickness. So there's opportunities for moving that wheel by educating.
Yeah. You kind of touched on it with cost. I mean, I feel like when I come to panels like this, I'm always like, but is it pencil? You know, all these great ideas, you know, someone has to be able to guinea pig at first and try it out. But, you know, I think it's also about practicality and, you know, can you repeat this on multiple projects? So I guess I'm curious for the, you know, we'll kind of go down the line, but with the lead volume program, Lindsay, you talked about, obviously there's the cost savings from the certification fees, but those are somewhat maybe a drop in the bucket when it comes to the overall development. Outside of that, are you seeing other benefits of savings or ways that you're streamlining things? And then maybe it is the savings for GVCI fees too.
The savings for the GVCI fees is definitely it is a drop in the bucket in comparison. However, historically, it's still the first, you know, item that people will take out if we need to save some money. Whereas now, because of those savings, it's not. And I think additionally, you know, we're still working on collecting data, but there is data for future leasing and selling of the buildings when there is this certification. Even if we are doing a cold dark shell and we end up leasing it to a triple net, you know, single tenant, they recognize what the building has as a core and shell, and compared to a building, you know, an industrial building down the street that does not have the certification, that are leasing at maybe the same price, they're going to go with ours because of the certification. Depending on the market, I don't think we're necessarily seeing some that have a higher rate if we're going to either lease it or sell it. However, it is very dependent on the market and the prospective tenants. I think we just need more data to be able to realize that well.
Awesome. And then I guess, Richard, for you with the slabs, you know, obviously you talked about it, you know, it is somewhat pioneering, so there's some challenges there, but what have you guys seen in terms of cost and what's that look like from the bottom line?
Well, I think whenever you do something new, you know, all the people that are involved in it kind of pad their numbers a little bit. So the GC is like, I don't know what you're having us do, so I'm going to put a little bit extra. And so initially we did see some additional costs to do that. But we're doing it on all our new developments now. And after a little bit of a learning curve, you get a few of those salty superintendents that look at things from a different way. And we found that it's actually reduced the time frame on us being able to install these. Of course, it's less material. Mm-hmm. And after the first learning curve, we're actually seeing reduced costs and reduced material. And also, it's going to be the back end and just maintenance of that. You have less control joints you have to maintain. This new product helps with just the curling. You're not going to see that where they're potentially going to have to do some prolonged maintenance. So while there's a little bit of reduced costs up front, along with a decrease in installation, long term we'll find less maintenance costs.
Jason, if you have anything else on what you guys have seen with the hub, specifically around savings or additional cost? Or
yeah, of course. I mean, that's obviously the number one question we get, right? First of all, how'd you do it? And did it pencil on the front end? And, you know, what was the appetite for the cost increase? Because some of those things that we used did come at a premium, right? Like tips panels, for those of you who are aware of what it is or aren't, it's a proprietary system. And because it's a proprietary system, you know, you have to go through them, and there's a markup associated with it. And it's it comes out, the concrete provider constructs the panel on site. It's, you know, it's a very good system. It can be inefficient for the installers to put it together, and so it's priced accordingly. So the tips panels and the Eco Slab, which is SEM's creative mix design, represent about a 5% cost increase for the overall project. However, because we're able to thin up the slab and use less volume of concrete, we're using less material, and so there is a cost savings that significantly offset what we ended up incurring as far as like the proprietary system and the cost premiums. So it did help. It didn't completely alleviate it, but we got close to it. And the other thing is that, kind of to what you were saying a little bit earlier about, normalizing it in the market, 1L cement in the mixed design, that's something that's, it's not new, but it's also not common and everywhere. And things that are unique are more expensive because it costs more to put it in place. So the more we normalize it, the more we see that the cost will come down.
Yeah.
It would be a normalizing market, and hopefully we see a little bit of a level set on the cost.
Yeah. Yeah, I think about a lot of the embodied carbon technologies are almost like solar, a decade ago. So expensive, and now we've normalized that. So that's kind of where I see the industry going, is all the things you guys are doing become, commonplace, and then we got to figure out what's next. I guess we'll flip the coin over, and we talked about embodied carbon. So thinking about operational carbon and ongoing carbon, maybe we do the same thing. Lindsay, start with you, and just what's inspiring, what are you guys thinking about when it comes to ongoing carbon, operational carbon, energy efficiency, and everything?
Yeah. For those who don't know, Lincoln Property Company is a full-service real estate firm. So we do development, we own, we also property manage, lease. And so, I almost have two perspectives of this because, we're fortunate where sometimes we get to see a project through its full life cycle, building through its full life cycle, from development into its operations, and we're still holding them after 25 years and managing them. And then alternatively, there's times where we are brought on as the property managers, and in all cases, I think what inspires me and energizes me the most is the collaboration that we have with basically every stakeholder. I think that's one reason why I love sustainability, is I get to work with so many people from so many, careers and professions, but it's how can we work with our capital partners, our investors, the diverse tenant groups that, just as Grant was previewing, all the different types of industrial warehouses that we get to work with across the country. And then how do we then collaborate to make buildings more efficient and a better workplace?
Yeah, you're next for sure.
My turn. Anyone that knows me, and these guys always pull me in, I'm always inspired by solar and energy independence. And at Rexford, I head up the solar strategy program, and I'm always inspired by the ability to kind of generate your own energy and kind of take yourself off of the grid a little bit. Now, you can't necessarily do that quite often on industrial spaces, because if you want to take them off the grid, you potentially might hinder their operations. But what can you do? It's generating power for them. And as a building owner, and one that is helping them to be able to be successful in their business, one of the things that we're doing is growing our solar platform across all of our properties. And on the back end, we've kind of two sides of that coin. One, kind of offset your demand on the grid. You're helping sustainability side of that. The other side is, as a property owner and publicly traded company, we have the benefit of being able to sell that energy to the tenant. And when energy is coming from one way or the other, we just like the ability to give our tenants renewable energy as opposed to them buying it off the grid. And it's always new ways, quite a lot of changing things in the market, but it's interesting and fun.
My turn?
Yeah.
So I got a couple things. So one, to take your comment or your quote, you can't change what you don't track. And so the embodied carbon is obviously a huge piece for the industrial space and changing that and reducing that. But the secondary part of that is operational carbon and our tenants and how they use their energy. And as a property owner, how do we curb that and how do we reduce that? So we have partnered with a company, Redaptive, to install shadow metering on every one of our industrial properties. And the hope there is that we will be able to gather this utility data and energy usage for water, gas, power, and then disseminate that to our tenants. I understand they get that from their utility bills, but it's not in real time. It's often very clumsy. Nobody really pays attention to it. And our goal is to give that to them in a way that is front and center. It's something that they're looking at frequently. And by tracking it and seeing it, it accomplishes a couple of things. They can, see where their deficiencies are, change their behavior, reduce their energy consumption. It also shines a light on inefficiencies in the systems where they may have, an energy leak or a water leak or, something like that, where they've got a climate unit, unit that's going out of its life, and it's running very inefficiently. So it shines a light on all those things, and hopefully, that will help the operational carbon reduce. So that's a big initiative that we're doing. And then the other thing is to kind of elaborate on normalizing initiatives in the marketplace. So keep going back to the TIPS panels. It's a proprietary system. We're working with engineers to come up with designs that are repeatable in the field, that are not proprietary systems. So it's not like we have to wait for a delivery or use these inefficient construction systems. It's largely a conventional approach with a new design that mimics what we've done with TIPS. And by normalizing that, hopefully that cost comes down significantly as well.
Awesome.
Yeah, so with embodied carbon, the more carbon, the more energy goes into it. So obviously that should cost more, but now when you get operations, you have other strategies and stuff. So one exciting thing is solar is so cheap. And, when you have 12 to 20%, return on investment, or a third party comes in to do a PPA, that's a really great thing. I think other exciting stuff is the codes, California code requiring solar and battery in all projects. I'll talk about hurdles for that later on, but so far this year, 200 out of the roughly 300 days, the grid is run for right of the day off of renewable energy completely, usually about 2 hours a day running on batteries. Some stats: and gas for electricity in California is down 37% from 2023. Solar is up 43%, and batteries are up 200% from 2023. So we're definitely moving in that direction. That California should be able to run 100% renewable energy by, I think, 2033, 2035. So exciting things.
That's awesome. It would be the sustainability consultant that says he's excited about codes and policies. Building codes don't always get developers super happy. But I think that's the cool thing too. It's like it helps. So we're all talking about it. It's like that helps push the market. You need to have, that's almost the floor lifting, and it's stuff that we're talking about up here that's raising the ceiling, and you kind of have that cycle. So yeah, I guess you mentioned hurdles, Ryan. What what are some of the benefits you're seeing from some of those codes and regulations or hurdles? How are people navigating that?
Yeah, so the codes in California require solar and battery before you can get your C of O. The solar battery for industrial is pretty small. You can get it there. But if you wanted to do what like Richard's doing, trying to go for 80% renewable energy on all their projects, it's a bigger building that could cause a problem because you can't get your C of O until you have solar. And if you're getting up and towards a megawatt of power, you have an interconnection study. It could take 3, 6, 8 months. You're designing, permitting, install. Your solar project could take longer than designing and building a warehouse. Then you could also have the grid with Edison not having capability on the grid, so their equipment can't even handle what's coming. So sometimes you do a dinky little solar array just to get your C of O, and some of these are honestly stupid. They're smaller than the size of my house. Getting commercial people to do commercial solar for a 4 kW solar array, you're getting charged $5-6 a watt. It's just not efficient. So that's an issue. But other things on the PPA, you can put up a PPA, $0 down, 0 investment, and cash flow positive. So the developer is getting money from the PPA company. The tenant gets 10 to 15% cheaper power, and that's renewable energy. So there's exciting things too, but definitely some big hurdles that we come across.
Yeah. Jason, you were talking a lot about energy metering, and I think that plugs in a little bit to some of the renewables, energy efficiency. But what are some of the things you guys are seeing the benefits of, shadow metering, and how are you looking beyond just like the initial install today?
Yeah, so the second piece to that is energy as a service. So I kind of alluded to it before about, once you start tracking the information and you can disseminate it, and everybody becomes, users included, become more aware of what they're using and how to approach it, then the next thing is like, okay, well, what do I do with this data? Like, how do I implement reductions? And there's, energy as a service where it can, in our case, Redaptive come in and be a lot more detailed in their approach. They can isolate different systems. They can get rather robust and detailed with it. And that's something that then becomes kind of a tool for the tenant at the tenant's appetite. So it's not something that, because of how involved it can be, and let's be honest, it can be expensive. That's not something that we would do like on a spec warehouse on the front end, because a tenant may come in and say, yeah, I'm not interested in any of that. I just want to like ship pallets and we're good. But a tenant may come in like Amazon or the like and say, yes, sustainability is very important to us, and we're willing to invest, co-invest, and go in the same path as you guys and take advantage of energy as a service. So that's kind of the next steps in that initiative, and we're really excited about that.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I find that like the more sometimes data can be overwhelming. But when it comes to stuff around renewables and energy and efficiency for your buildings, it's only powerful. And I guess, Lindsay, for you, talking about like just the relationship between partners and stuff like that, curious to hear how that's going. What are some of the benefits or maybe hurdles that you guys are overcoming in those relationships?
Yeah, and again, if I think of it from our two perspectives, so as a developer, there's actually a project that we're working on with Phineas right now, and Jason and I were laughing just talking the story about it, because industrial, it's two phases. We did two of the buildings, the first two buildings a few years ago, and it was time to do the second two, and Phineas came to Lincoln team and said, okay, we're ready. We now have a goal of doing, these need to be LEED certified, and we have a LEED volume program. And our Lincoln project manager responded, perfect, we do too. And that's the first time that's especially for industrial at Lincoln, that was just such a positive experience. And for us, that alignment of goals from day one of that project is then carried out through this life cycle of the project. So we can't control who's going to end up leasing those buildings. And again, it is a business, it's tenant driven. We can only go so far, or as far as they will let us. But, the more alignment and partnerships that we have with groups like that just increases the standardization and acceptance of this. And then I'd say from an operating asset perspective, the establishing relationships with existing tenants. Most often as property managers, who our point of contact is for the tenant of the building is a facilities manager. It may not necessarily be a decision maker, and it may not necessarily be a person that is aware or informed of that firm's larger corporate policies or goals. And so by taking no as a response over and over and over again, to build that relationship, we're seeing opportunity then at that specific building, but then if it's a national or even a regional firm, that then creates opportunity for other buildings. So maybe they're looking to expand into another market that we happen to have a building for, or know of a vacancy. So it's, we're using sustainability to thread those relationships and further them, which again, in turn helps us all overall, because it's making those buildings more efficient. We're helping the tenants realize opportunities, then also as owner, or if it's a joint venture, those savings are then also realized for our reporting. So, it's just threading the needle to try and make that complete circle to show that there is value for all stakeholders.
Awesome. I guess, as we're talking about operational carbon, you always have to talk about renewables. And Ryan sort of touched on it. I always get bummed out when I'm flying into Los Angeles and you go over the Inland Empire. There's so many warehouse roofs with just a little bit of solar. The code is just, it's not totally there yet. But what inspires me about, Richard, what you guys are doing at Rexford is you're saying, let's go the other direction. Like, how much solar can we get up there that makes sense? So maybe you could just elaborate on some of the things that you guys have worked through as you develop that strategy.
Yeah, so one of the things that Rexford has is a net zero goal, and we're kind of jumping on solar shoulders to be able to get us there. And when your objective is to achieve net zero, you start looking at every little type of opportunity to increase solar. So as Ryan went to, there is code required amount of solar, which is basically about the same size as would be on a large house. And it really doesn't offset their usage. So what we're doing is looking at a typical warehouse distribution tenant, which is generally most of our tenants. What is their typical usage? And let's put a system on that we believe is going to offset their 80% of their demand. And go big. And that's what we're doing that on all new developments. And at the same time, you go look at your existing assets and you start working with your tenants. We get plenty of tenants that do have their own sustainability goals. They're like, hey, we want to go solar. We've got a partner here that wants to put the system on, and we want to go and what can you do? We jump in and we say, how about you let us put the system in for you? We will come up with the capital. We'll own and maintain it for you. All we ask is you buy the energy from us at a reduced rate. And you kind of work strategically together for a common goal. And at the same time, we're able to kind of put more and more solar across the entire portfolio. So there is issues, so trying to get that solar installed in a timely manner to be able to get a TCO. We haven't run into the problem. Or plan check. We haven't run into the problem so far. We've been lucky. One was difficult in LA because LA is a little bit of a difficult utility to work with. And that was a very small system. And so we went in there and we're like, we're not going to go big. It's LA, DWP. They're difficult to work with. Let's put a small system on. Let's try to make sure that we get the system installed and passed. And we were able to do that. Southern California, Edison, San Diego, Rexford's just in Southern California, just FYI. 400 properties down here. And so we only have to work with these small utilities, and we've been able to do it and get the system passed and be able to get TCO in time without compromising the schedule of the actual main purpose of what we're doing, and that's to get a new building up and running.
I'm going to go off script a little bit and put you on the spot. You mentioned 80%. What's the reason for doing 80%? A lot of people are saying I want to be net zero 100%, but sometimes that's not always maybe practical with the spec developers. So just curious to hear about how some of that gets factored in.
So we're at spec build, so we're never really sure who's going to get into that space. So we're looking at it as just your typical warehouse distribution who uses about 2 kilowatt hours per square foot. Very small. And in case if anyone's not really sure, that'll probably fill up 10% of the roof space to get 80%, leaving a bunch of real estate still available, but we can't maximize it. That's as far as we're able to do because the utility only allows us to put a system in that does not exceed the use of that ratepayer. And the reason we go to 80% instead of 90 or 100, we're a REIT. We can't sell energy back to the grid. It's bad income for us. So we're kind of giving ourselves a little bit of a buffer so that we don't exceed it. We're putting this on every single building, and maybe we might get one or two that will go over the 100%. It'll be okay, but we want to make sure that that doesn't go across every single one of our buildings. So that's why the 80%.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Sweet spot.
Yeah, you got to find it. I guess when we talk about, the financial side, you guys are, putting the money up front to develop this. Brian, I'm curious in your perspective on cash or versus maybe power purchase agreements, and just give us maybe the sales pitch or why other people might look at installing solar from that perspective.
Sure, yeah. So we provide solar owner rep work, so we're agnostic to which solar company, what solar panels, whatever else. We're just here to make sure you don't get swindled, bamboozled, snake oil, used car salesmen. Developers getting calls how often? Twice a week, once a week. We got the best solar panel, blah, blah, blah. And you have the cash deal. So if you have a tax appetite, you can take the depreciation and you want to maintain it, operate it, or I think Rex also has a third party that helps maintain some of the panels and do some billing. If you don't have a tax appetite, it doesn't make sense because we're getting 30, 40, 45% back. Then you'd have a third party come in and do PPA. So power purchase agreement as a third party design, install, operate, maintain, build the tenant, and then they give you a cut or just a flat fee per, say, megawatt. So a developer can have a net operating income of an extra 25, 30, 100 grand a year, just letting the roof have solar, and the tenant gets 10% cheaper power, and you get more lead points. So it depends us really well. But now we have the big, beautiful bill. So there's some deadlines coming up, January and July, forcing people for foreign products or just to get your project up and running. There'll be some deadlines that are going to hinder that, but even if you take out those tax credits, it still pencils more than what you could buy borrow traditional money. So you still could be cash flow positive if you're borrowing money to do all that.
Awesome. I guess before we kind of move on to the last section, any other final thoughts on energy efficiency that anyone?
Well, one thing about the solar is that while it does pencil now with NEM 3.0, how many people here know about NEM 3? How many people don't want to answer questions? Don't raise your hand if you don't want to answer questions. Okay, so everybody, in California on the IOUs, we have NEM 3.0. So we're traditionally at net metering, and you would get, say, if it's 12 cents they're charging you and you overproduce, you get 12-cent credit. Now, if they're charging you 12 cents and you overproduce, you get 2 cents, 1 cent. There's windows of times where they will charge you money if you feed it into the grid. So it's really made a mix-up, and it's every day, every hour, every week is different. Very hard to judge. So now you really don't want to overproduce, because you overproduce, you're getting a pathetic credit. So I'm hoping that NEM 3 goes away at some point, but just want to mention on that.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Well, I guess kind of moving on to the end is, we're talking about what you guys are doing now in terms of decarbonization and what's inspiring, but, there's all these goals around, we need to be net zero by 2040, 2050 is too far. I don't want to hear a 2050 goal, but like, what does the next 5 years look like? What inspires you over that period of time? Where do you think the market's going? What are you guys looking at? Let's end on like a high inspirational note. And we'll start at the end, Ryan, and just kind of roll down this way.
Yeah, I think more storage. I think batteries are pretty expensive. I'm looking at hydrogen. A lot of industrial developers are using hydrogen for their forklifts because it takes a shorter time to charge them up than batteries. You could purchase less of them because of that time. Short haul, we have the wear points in the Inland Empire. We have the South Coast Air Quality Management District that requires tracking all the vehicles. So we're moving much more towards, the short hauls being electric or hydrogen. And, battery trucks aren't going to go from LA to Phoenix. Hydrogen could. And as we're moving towards an abundance of power at times, scatter goods in El Segundo, that power plant went down, and they're turning it into a green hydrogen facility to where when the grid has too much power, they'll make hydrogen that then can go over towards LAX and other fleet vehicles. So if you were to overproduce electricity, you can convert it on your property. You put just batteries that cap off, you could turn it to hydrogen, store it, and then bring that hydrogen back out to a fuel cell and run the buildings. I think there'll be both for forklifts, overabundance of power, and for vehicle and transportation. I think hydrogen might be coming along. I think Jason's got some other ideas.
I respectfully disagree. Not that I disagree with that at all. I just, I'm getting a little bit outside of my expertise here. Well, SMRs, I know like the technology's not there yet, but we SMR, small modular reactor. For those of you who don't know, but it is, it's actively in development, and I don't know a whole lot about it. I just know that, with the obvious increase in the market with data centers and the increased power need, it is affecting all markets. Industrials, just regular industrial warehouses, we're getting will serve letters pulled right and left just because we have a will serve letter, and a certain jurisdiction will say, hey, we'll guarantee you some power. Data center comes into the market and says, no, we'll use that power, and all of a sudden we're kind of left trying to work it out for ourselves. So there is a power dynamic, as most of us here are all well aware, and something needs to change with that. I know we're talking about carbon reduction, but it is very closely tied, right? We find out we can find a way to have clean energy and less power usage, less tax on the grid. It will equate to less, lower carbon, lower operational carbon, and yeah, I mean, it's probably 5 to 10 years away. But and then the other part of that that is all the normalization in the market. 5 to 10 years down the road, I definitely see that once the power thing gets figured out, and it will, there'll be something else to focus on, but that's kind of where I see it going.
I would say, from my perspective, it's just partnerships and keeping your mind open, or your eyes and ears open to new opportunities. We are looking at hydrogen. We were kind of exploring that as maybe there's an opportunity there. Haven't found an application quite yet. He's knocking on my door to do more batteries on our buildings, but space is always limited for us, so we haven't really found some good opportunities to battery, but we're still trying to find ones where we can do a large solar battery installation. We're partnering up with our EV and be able to kind of universally have the same product across the whole entire portfolio. Partnering up with third-party billing, with Ivy Energy to help us to be able to maintain billing for our solars. And then microgrids. We're actually trying to find some opportunities for microgrids where we're seeing challenges on being able to get the power that we need to on our buildings, and seeing if that is an opportunity. Cost still is extremely high for that, but you just got to make the case for the long-term opportunity for that tenant to be able to continue operations, and what is that value placed in. So it's constantly trying to find that new idea, that new solar, that new reduced slab, the new zip panel. What's next on the market that you can possibly fold into your product and bring added value to your company?
I'd say, expanding on that, one thing I'm most excited and energized for is the recognizing new opportunities, but also recognizing current practices in place, specifically with our team, so that we can, bring awareness and education. One of my personally missions is education, because there's so many misconceptions in the marketplace and within our industry, and I respect all for coming to a panel today to talk about industrial decarbonization, because I don't think we would have even had this 5 years ago and the room be actually packed. So I think, in 5 years, I'm optimistic that we're going to be beyond our wildest dreams of what is out there. But I think recognizing the new opportunities that we may not even know yet, it's also standardizing the practices that we do have in place. I pick on this one so much, but even just tracking waste, that does not necessarily have the greatest impact, but sometimes we still have vendors that will charge us extra just to provide waste tickets on a new development project. But by expanding our partnerships with our general contractors, with our A&E teams, with our capital partners, with our tenants, and making it be everyone's best practice and standard, then we're going to start, we are starting to see those the cost pluses be reduced and to be normalized. So I think just continuing that trend and seeing where it goes over the next five years.
Awesome. Yeah, it's funny. I feel like there's the goal to get to net zero. I guess the pathway for operational carbon's it's pretty simple. It's reduce as much energy as you can, and then it's offset at renewables on site, and then off-site renewables if you need that. But we talked about it with like the growth of data centers, EV charging, like electric cars. Like, we're actually kind of doing the opposite. We're growing our energy use. So I feel like we have to have creative solutions. And like I mentioned it earlier, but I think what inspires me is maybe all that open space on roofs. Richard had a great point that, for a lot of these industrial buildings, it's 10 to maybe 30% of your roof is solar is what's needed to offset that. So you have these 1 million square foot buildings with huge roofs, and there's just so much potential. Obviously, like process loads, a data center, cold storage, they can use all of their roof space. But for all these logistics hubs, there's just a lot of opportunities. So what inspires me is, yes, we can build solar, but I think it's those, Ryan touched on a little bit, it's the utilities. There are some amazing utilities in states that have community solar programs that will find subscribers where you can actually max out your roof, and you can sell that back to the grid. But a lot of states don't have that yet. So I'd love to see states like California, where Ryan mentions we have so much power, we're sending it to Phoenix. Like we're basically paying them, like, take the electricity away. That doesn't make sense to me. So how can we find ways to let's install 100% of your roof with solar. Let's couple that with whether it's hydrogen, creating hydrogen, battery storage, or other ways, just because, I love TPO reflective roofs, but I'd also love to see those plastered with solar. So yeah, I think that kind of rounds out what we wanted to talk about today, but we have awesome room here. We have a microphone if people want to come up and ask a few questions, but while people are walking up, I'll just or we got people. I was going to throw a question out to the group. We'll go straight to it. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Get started.
First, I just want to underscore Lindsay's point. It's incredible that there's a packed room on this topic. But I really want to commend you all for putting the panel together because this has been really great. So there's one element you didn't mention in terms of the net zero thing in relation to existing buildings and operational is gas-fired equipment that's out there. And so I'm wondering how y'all approach equipment replacement when sometimes it's a tenant responsibility or you might be doing it because the existing equipment failed. Do you have capital planning to not just do an in-kind replacement because you can't, if it's an emergency, in-kind might be the only option on the spot, but you might want to be positioned to make a decision to put a heat pump in or that kind of thing?
As a head of the capital project, so within our company, I head up on all the capital improvements.
I add up all the capital improvements, and we're going and transitioning to all heat pumps. So if we're ever going into and we're replacing any of those HVAC units, we're going to heat pumps to be able to eliminate the gas needs on that property.
What? You go for it.
We recognize that, at least at LinkedIn, we recognize that is an area that we are now planning for in the future because we have legacy leases at some properties. So we cannot, unless the tenant wants to, there's no contractual obligation to do it. And so I think that's, part of collaborating with brokers in a lot more detail to say, hey, I know you guys usually let them take these 2 paragraphs out of the leases typically, but this one, we actually we need them to share their data, and we need to be able to actually, share and plan together the capital improvements for the building. They can use whatever at their own, creative design, but this is the long-term goal of the asset. And that is starting to get more accepted, but we're still having pushback on that.
I was just going to say one more thing. Gas is so cheap and it's so efficient at heating, which is unfortunate because it makes it challenging sometimes to say, let's do a heat pump or electrify in colder climates. But it's possible. So there might be a slight premium in energy cost, but I'm going to shamelessly plug, there's so much stuff on decarbonization. We put a little guide together, and there's a really cool study in there. You can come up and grab one of those with a little QR code, but it looks at how do you decarbonize and move away or electrify and get rid of gas. And then if you install solar, there's pencils in almost every market. That was done before the big beautiful bill, so do it today. But yeah, it's definitely possible.
All right, thank you. Thanks for a great panel. I'm Christy Wilson with Branch Pattern. I did have a question. So you guys covered embodied carbon and operational really well. I was curious if y'all are considering the embodied carbon for the solar panels and then making choices to buy certain panels depending on the embodied carbon, or maybe just even asking for the EPDs to go along with the solar.
You had a great panel on MEPs and LCAs earlier. If you didn't listen to it, it was awesome. So I'll jump in here really quick. I do a lot of the work around embodied carbon, and I think, like everything, things move in progression. So, like Ryan mentioned, we didn't have a lot of EPDs, 10, years ago, 5 years ago. So doing an LCA was challenging. And now we're getting to that point where, a couple years ago, we couldn't really do an LCA for mechanical equipment. So the data is becoming more prevalent. So it's something that we're now factoring in. There are some great stats that you guys had in your panel about 20 to 30% of your embodied carbon could come from mechanical equipment. And again, that depends on the buildings and types of stuff. But if we're talking about a cold storage facility, that could be a lot of the upfront carbon there. So the answer is yes, we are looking at it. But again, it is, data. We need to ask those questions to suppliers. So it is coming, and that's, it's something we have to figure out.
Hi, I wanted to ask you, since you're doing a lot of carbon reduction because of the photovoltaics, can you account for the tons of CO2 that the tenant is actually reducing so that you can help the tenant, fulfilling the requirements for their plan for decarbonization?
To clarify that, are they taking the credits for the solar, or is the tenant taking the credits for their solar for their ESG goals?
Right, like if I am a tenant in one of your buildings, like can I say I am reducing my carbon footprint because the building is photovoltaic based?
What we're doing is we're retiring those renewable energy credits at the property, and then we're helping the tenant to be able to go and offset their carbon, but it benefits both.
Thank you.
A lot of the PPAs, they retain the carbon credits.
Unfortunately, when you're sometimes in some jurisdictions, this one right here with feed-in tariff program, those renewable energy credits go to the utility company. So we can't actually be able to retire those at the property. So what we're actually looking to do is to piggyback two systems on the property. One that is going to be feeding the power to the tenant, and then thereby taking those renewable energy credits and retiring them there, and then taking the remainder of the roof and using it is for the in front of the meter and selling that back to the utility company in their program.
Great panel. I wanted to ask about a part of the title of the session around long-term value and resilience. So we're talking a lot about the embodied carbon impacts. I just wanted to hear from the panel, your thoughts on, are you seeing impacts to cost of capital, maybe benefits or a thesis of liquidity or obsolescence as you're thinking about exit? If we're talking about long-term value, not only are you attracting tenants, maybe there's a parity on leasing, but where else can you extract the value?
It's good to see you, Jason.
Yeah.
So long-term value, liquidity. The reality is that a lot of investors and lenders are, they are seeking these initiatives. They are seeking, LEED certification. They want to do carbon reduction. The $1 million question literally is, but we want it for free, right? And so trying to navigate that dynamic and prove that there's value in the asset, I think that's what you're kind of asking, is that is there increased value on the exit? Is there interest in the market for somebody to pay a premium for a project that we've paid a premium to develop? We haven't seen any physical examples of that. I can say that, but I can speak to the hub to where there is a lot of leasing activity. There's a lot of excitement around it. It's it's a well-toured, well-known development in the local marketplace, and so we've seen. I would say to answer that question directly, we have seen increased interest in increased occupancy, but not necessarily increased value in cost and increased rents. If that answers that, but I mean, an occupied, leased, stabilized facility that kind of speaks for itself. That's value.
Yeah, I mean, if somebody across the street digs and you dig, which one leases up faster?
Yeah, exactly.
2 months early leasing for their neighbor.
And I think one other thing from the existing building perspective, if it's a triple net building, and I have read more leases than I enjoy it now. Let's embrace positivity. There's almost always a preventative maintenance clause. The tenant needs to provide preventative maintenance plan for the building systems, all the HVAC systems, share the reports, the frequency of the reports, identify areas, of opportunity of issue. That rarely happens. And then as well as maintaining the building since its development. I know, kind of going back to Barry's question earlier about going from gas to electric, if you haven't checked the building envelope and you don't know if there's actually an opportunity to decrease the energy load, don't switch instantly from gas to electric. Try to decrease your load so then you can convert with lower kilowatts. But we're working right now to improve our preventative maintenance and our actual operations so that when we do go to sell it, we can say, hey, the systems are actually running well, running as designed, running as intended, and we have the proof of that, whereas most industrial buildings don't have the proof. You know, they do a property condition assessment, they walk around it, they say, all looks good, you got the bills, good. But so we're trying to, you know, expand the data set, you know, data, we all want more, to use that to try and increase the value of it.
Awesome. We have maybe a minute left. We got one question. Give us a softball to end with.
Hopefully. On the developer side, when it comes to decarbonizing your buildings and choosing certain designs or materials that will change your designs, I know you mentioned tips, I know you mentioned slabs. How do you approach the market perception beast from the brokers and the customer side if you're changing your design?
Great question. Not a softball question.
Sorry.
It's a very good question.
Are you asking about performance? Like,
No, I'm asking about we can't change the design because it's not market standard.
yeah, I mean, the reality is we have to change that perception, and you're asking how we do that, and reality is the time will tell. I mean, what we've done on the engineering side for the sustainability stuff is you calculate things like flexural strength and stuff like that to not compromise on performance, and you add little other things like Richard mentioned extended joint spacing, armored joints in the speed base, things of that nature that increase the performance and help add to it. And I think we can say one thing and we can provide numbers and calculations and all that, but I don't think the market perception will truly shift until time has gone by and they've seen that it works. And I'm not sure that there's a substitute for that, but you know, that kind of is what it is.
I need to cut us off. But we'll hang around up here. I don't want to get kick this off stage because we're a few minutes over now. But yeah, great question. I mean, at the end of the day, it's about education. You guys are all here to learn, and we can bring that to tenants and projects and everything. So thank you, everybody.